OK, hi. Hi, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. L'an passé, je suis allée au Bourget. Last year, I was at the Bourget Air Show. And at the time, I said to the aerospace sector that we would be rebuilding the aerospace sector. We worked with Bombardier, CAE, De Havilland, IMP. And the goal was really to make sure that while the industry in Canada has been very much focused on the commercial and civilian aerospace sector, that through our investments in defense, we would also be able to build even a stronger aerospace sector by benefiting from the investments in defense. And so over the last year, we've been able to put in place a defense industrial strategy. This strategy is the first industrial strategy for the defense sector since the Second World War. It is also a strategy that has the biggest budget that we've had in decades of $500 billion. And its objectives are clear: to create 125,000 jobs, to be able also to increase by 50% our exports. And since then, since the last year, we've been able also to be very clear in terms of what we would be able to do for the aerospace sector, from buying 6 Bombardier jets for the Canadian government and for armed forces and our scientists, to at the same time being able to land 150 new Airbus planes by AirAsia, and at the same time to be able to land a deal between Bombardier and Saab for the Global Eye for surveillance plane that will be bought by many countries within NATO. We've seen how much we've been able to go fast. And so in the context of this year, in 2026 at Farnborough, which is the air show that we've been attending, I was heading the delegation composed of 4 ministers. So I was with the Minister of Defense, David McGuinty, with the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement, Stephen Fuhr, as well as with the Minister of Transport. And we were able also to announce good news by many of our important national champions, from CAE being able to strike a deal with Turkish Airlines for more flight simulators and training, to an investment of $275 million by Pratt & Whitney Canada in their Longueuil, Montreal facility, to also an LOI between Bombardier and a helicopter company from Saudi Arabia of 60 jets. And finally, also my colleague, Minister of Defense, announced our participation in the 6th generation fighter development called GCAP to work with Italy, with the UK and Japan. So all that came out of Farnborough. So good news. And it shows that the defense industrial strategy is working, but also that we're reaching out a lot to different middle powers, and that we're able to do more business with Sweden, with Germany, more with Italy, with the UK, and with Japan. Also, in London, I was able also to attend and make a speech before Chatham House. Also was able to host at Canada House an event of 500 people with the aerospace sector, participated in the Ontario Aviation reception, and tonight I'm heading to the Investissement Québec reception in order to engage with the aerospace sector, but also to make sure that we continue to attract more investments in Canada. Alors voilà, j'étais au Bourget à la foire de l'aérospatiale l'an passé. À l'époque, je venais tout juste d'être nommée ministre de l'Industrie, et j'ai beaucoup travaillé au cours de la dernière année avec le secteur de l'aérospatiale pour être capable non seulement de le développer au niveau du secteur aérospatial civil et commercial, qui est notre force au Canada, mais aussi de l'amener à être capable de saisir les opportunités au niveau de la défense. Et dans ces circonstances-là, au cours de la dernière année, on a publié notre stratégie industrielle de la défense. Stratégie industrielle, je dirais, très bien reçue et très précise dans ses objectifs, de vouloir créer 125 000 nouveaux emplois, de pouvoir augmenter de 50% les exportations, également de pouvoir accorder 70% des contrats d'approvisionnement dans le secteur de l'aérospatiale ou pour la défense de façon générale à des compagnies canadiennes. Farnborough, cette année, était vraiment la suite logique du Bourget dans la mesure où on était capable d'annoncer notre stratégie industrielle très ambitieuse, mais en même temps, on a été capable de démontrer au cours de l'année à quel point il y a eu des investissements et des bonnes nouvelles dans le secteur de l'aérospatial. Bref, que le secteur aérospatial, présentement, vit de belles années et sincèrement, est présentement en train de passer à travers un boom économique intéressant. Et donc, on a été capable, dans le contexte de Farnborough, avec mes collègues, alors que je dirigeais la délégation présente, donc mes collègues au transport, à la défense et à l'approvisionnement militaire, d'annoncer 4 bonnes nouvelles. La première entre CAE et Turkish Airlines pour des simulateurs d'aéronefs et pour également de la formation. Un investissement de 275 millions de dollars de la part de Pratt & Whitney Canada à Longueuil, aussi pour moderniser son usine. Également une lettre d'intention entre Bombardier et des Helicopter Company de l'Arabie Saoudite pour plus de 60 avions, donc vraiment une commande très importante. Et finalement, un partenariat industriel et militaire entre les pays de la Grande-Bretagne, du Japon, de l'Italie et nous-mêmes, le Canada, qu'on appelle GCAP. Et donc, ça démontre que notre stratégie industrielle est en train de fonctionner. Pardon. Et également, j'ai été capable ici à Londres de participer à Chatham House et d'y faire une allocution. Pardon. Également de diriger une réception, d'être lors d'une réception de plus de 500 personnes dans le domaine de l'aérospatiale, ici à Canada House, à la Maison du Canada. De participer à la réception également du secteur de l'aérospatial de l'Ontario. Et ce soir, c'est la réception de Investissement Québec ici à Londres, dans le but justement d'attirer plus d'investissements et de faire plus de réseautage entre le milieu des affaires québécois et également britannique. Donc, ça va me faire plaisir de répondre à vos questions alors que j'ai un petit chat dans la gorge. Après vous.
Merci, thank you. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction main levée, comme à l'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. Jillian Piper, please go ahead.
Yes, go ahead, Jillian.
Hi, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions today. Can you explain why your government has decided to split revenue with the Americans for 15 years on a bridge they put up $0 to build?
So thank you, Jillian, for that question. That is an important question, and I think it should be directed to the minister in charge of the file, which is Dominique Leblanc, and at the same time, the Prime Minister. And I think it is important to be able to work on the stability of the relationship between Canada and US, including when it comes to the Gordie Howe Bridge. Thank you.
I appreciate that some of your colleagues are also working on this, but I'm just wondering, does your government have an estimate of how much money Canada will give to the United States as part of the new Gordie Howe Bridge deal?
So thank you, Jillian, for the question. And of course, this, as I mentioned, is a really important question. And as I've not been privy to the different negotiations regarding the Gordie Howe Bridge, I think my colleague could be better answering. And ultimately, the goal of the government has always been to make sure that we would be able to get good value for money, but also knowing that there's a lot of unpredictability on the part of the U.S. administration dealing with the world as it is.
Prochaine question, Estelle Côté-Sroka.
Bonjour, Madame Joly, merci de répondre à nos questions. D'abord, je veux savoir comment on peut avoir confiance que les pourparlers au sujet de l'ACEUM vont bien aller entre le Canada et les États-Unis si les deux pays sont même pas capables de participer à une cérémonie conjointe pour souligner l'ouverture du pont Gordie Howe.
Merci Estelle. Première chose, je pense que on peut être rassurer du fait que le premier ministre Carney et le président Trump sont en contact constant. Il n'y a personne qui va être choqué par le fait que je dise qu'il y a beaucoup d'imprévisibilité de la part de l'administration américaine. Cette imprévisibilité, elle est gérée par le Canada, par le gouvernement, mais aussi par tous les gouvernements à travers le monde. Et donc, dans les circonstances, nous, ce qu'on essaie de faire, et mon boulot, c'est de pouvoir être capable d'offrir le plus de prévisibilité aux Canadiens et de mon côté, bien entendu, au milieu des affaires. Donc, pendant qu'on, oui, continue à négocier, on a une stratégie claire qui est qui a deux objectifs. Le premier, diversifier nos marchés. C'est pour ça que je suis à Londres présentement. C'est pour ça que je suis au Royaume-Uni pour trouver des occasions d'affaires pour nos entreprises qui sont victimes de la guerre tarifaire. Et deuxièmement, être capable de continuer d'être une destination pour les investissements au Canada. Donc, de pouvoir vraiment développer des grands projets qui vont attirer des investissements, qui vont créer des emplois. Concrètement, ça veut dire quoi? Ben, ces investissements dans le port de Montréal, dans Nouveau Monde Graphite au Québec, dans un TGV entre Toronto et Montréal et Québec, dans des grands projets d'infrastructures miniers, ferroviaires, aussi portuaires et au niveau énergétique. Et c'est comme ça qu'on va être capable, nous, d'en ressortir plus fort parce qu'on sait qu'on a une dépendance et une vulnérabilité par rapport à notre trop grande exposition au marché américain.
Concernant le pont, je comprends que ce n'est pas votre dossier, mais vous avez peut-être vu les critiques récentes du chef conservateur Pierre Poilievre qui accuse le premier ministre de se contredire parce qu'il aurait dit auparavant que le partage des recettes aurait lieu seulement lorsque la dette serait entièrement remboursée. Comment, justement, on peut avoir confiance que le gouvernement va faire preuve de transparence dans ses relations avec les États-Unis?
Je pense que le gouvernement va agir avec toute transparence. Notre objectif, c'est de pouvoir justement faire en sorte que les Canadiens soient au courant. Je pense que les Canadiens ne sont pas naïfs. Je pense qu'ils savent que on vit une situation difficile au Canada où l'administration Trump a des objectifs clairs de rapatrier plusieurs des emplois dans le secteur manufacturier, a des objectifs clairs aussi de gérer ses propres finances publiques. Et en même temps, le Canada est depuis trop longtemps vulnérable à cause de notre trop grande intégration au marché nord-américain. Il n'y a rien dans ce que je dis qui est nouveau. Et donc, ce qui est nouveau, par contre, c'est la menace de tariff qui a été annoncée par la Maison-Blanche cette semaine. Plus tôt aujourd'hui, j'ai eu l'occasion de parler avec différentes personnes dans le milieu des affaires, que ce soit la présidente de la Chambre de commerce du Canada, que ce soit la présidente de la Fédération des chambres de commerce du Québec, donc Candice Lang, Véronique Proulx et plusieurs autres, pour entendre leur point de vue quant à, premièrement, l'impact des tarifs et deuxièmement, surtout les mesures qu'on a mises en place pour aider les entreprises qui sont déjà affectées et qu'est-ce qui pourrait être fait de plus pour aider les entreprises. Vous savez, moi, mon boulot dans le gouvernement, c'est d'être en charge des conséquences de la guerre tarifaire, d'être en charge des lignes de front dans cette guerre tarifaire-là qui, à date, était l'acier, l'aluminium, le secteur automobile. Mais là, il y a plusieurs autres secteurs qui pourraient être affectés, certainement davantage le secteur de la foresterie qui l'était déjà, mais qui est encore plus visé, et d'autres secteurs. Alors, présentement, mon rôle, c'est de pouvoir comprendre quel est l'état de la situation, quelle entreprise pourrait être affectée et bien protéger les emplois.
Next question, Judy Trin.
Hello, Minister. Thank you for taking our questions. I just want to understand how your government can justify this Gordie Howe Bridge deal, given that it is worse than what we originally had. And also, what does this mean for further negotiations? How can Canadians and Quebecers, for example, trust your government that you won't make further concessions, especially when it comes to dairy and supply management?
Thank you, Judy. And I know that the recent announcements made by the Trump administration regarding the threat of tariff is important, and that many businesses and many workers across the country are concerned. We hear their concern, and we will make sure that we negotiate a good deal, a deal that is in the interest of Canadians. That being said, the Prime Minister is in charge of negotiating. He is hearing the different points of views of his ministers, of also different business leaders across the country. And he's meeting today with the premiers and PEI. My job in this context is to do two things. First, to be able to provide the analysis of the impacts of tariffs. And so being in charge of the front lines of this trade war, being able to offer what is our understanding of the impacts of these tariffs on the steel aluminum sector, on also the auto sector, the forestry sector, but also other sectors that could be now targeted. And my other job in this government is to make sure that the measures that we've put in place are going to the businesses that need it in order for jobs to be protected, for livelihoods to be protected, for communities to be protected, in order to really protect our industrial base. We know that the Trump administration has been going after manufacturing jobs, not only those in Canada, but also around the world. And in these circumstances, we want to make sure that we continue to have a very strong manufacturing sector, as it is key for Canada, and it is key to so many communities across the country.
Minister, you mentioned that the Prime Minister has been seeking out the advice of Cabinet. I'm wondering, as a minister in Carney's Cabinet, what are you recommending? I'm wondering because Pete Hoekstra last week during his panel said that the Canadians tried to sweeten the deal with more energy. Obviously, sweetening the deal is not working. Concessions that you have made have not worked. Is there an attitude shift? Do you want to take a harder stance? And I'm asking for your opinion as a minister in Mark Carney's Cabinet. Do you want to see retaliation now? Is this the time?
So, Judy, of course I have an opinion, but my job is to give it to the Prime Minister, and my job is not to negotiate in public. And the Prime Minister will do that negotiation. He will engage directly with the President. Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Canada-US Trade, along with Janice Charette, our Chief Negotiator, will engage with the administration, and I will provide them to the table the analysis of what's going on in the manufacturing sector, but also in different sectors that have been affected by the tariffs. And meanwhile, my job also is to attract foreign direct investment to Canada. That's exactly why I'm in London with the aerospace sector. The aerospace sector is going through a boom right now. There has been so many good news. It's notwithstanding the trade war, actually in high growth. And so we know that there are certain sectors we can focus on that can eventually also help us to protect jobs. And we know also that our defense investments will help and will be used as an economic stimulus to make sure that we can protect many of the jobs in the auto sector, but also empower the aerospace sector in order to be able to have workers have access to great careers that are in the manufacturing sector, and therefore that could be interested in pivoting their careers towards the aerospace sector. So these are examples of what we're trying to do concretely speaking. These are not only words, we're actually in action mode. And so that's why I've listed all the different things we did. Concretely speaking, the results we're able to get in the last year in the aerospace sector that have actually increased the job opportunities across the aerospace sector, from jobs in Montreal and Mirabel to jobs also in Ontario, in Calgary, in Nova Scotia, and in BC.
Next question, Peter Zimonich. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Minister. Can you hear me?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I can hear.
Great. So I have a couple questions. The first one is to do with the Gordie Howe Bridge. I know your favorite subject, but there's currently a lot of, it's been delayed for a while. There's bad relations between the two countries. The opening party has been canceled. Despite all this to and fro and this kind of appearance of bad blood between these two countries, why was it important to open this bridge now? Why was it important that this opened despite all of those ongoing disputes?
So thank you, Peter. I think I've answered that question. Two other of your colleagues have asked me that question. And I know you would like to have more than the answers I provided, but these were my answers.
I'm not asking you for details of the contract. I'm just saying, why is the bridge important? Why should it be open?
Sorry, I didn't hear you well. Can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I'm not asking you for any details of the contract or decisions around that. I'm just asking you why the bridge is important. Why should it be open? Why is it important to Canada to have this bridge open?
Well, of course, the Gordie Howe Bridge is important to Canada because it's a key link between Ontario and Michigan, and it is at the core of the auto sector economic zone, where we know that many auto parts go back and forth. Basically, the province and the state, and between Canada and the US. And we think that more than the auto sector, it is also a good link to be able to transport many products from Canada to the US and from US to Canada. Let's all remember that Canada is the number one export market for the auto sector. So by the US, and overall, Canada is the biggest client of the US, buying more than the UK, France, and Japan from the US. So concretely speaking, these are not only figures, these are not only statistics, these are everyday realities where people go back and forth between their both countries.
Thank you, Minister.
Pleasure, Peter.
Next question, David Rivley. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much for doing this, Minister.
Hi, David. Pleasure.
Is about the funding for Pratt & Whitney in Longueuil. This was the day after the president launched his latest attacks on Canadian industry and Canadian goods. You went out and promised $34 million to an American defense contractor to keep jobs in Canada. How is that elbows up? What are we thinking here by doing this?
Well, I don't think people in the aerospace sector would think that Pratt & Whitney Canada is actually an American company. It's been in Quebec Longueuil for 95 years, and our goal is to anchor it for the next 95 years. The Pratt & Whitney Canada facility is so key to the aerospace sector. This is where some of the F-35 engines are built. This is where many of the engines for Airbus are built. This is where many of the engines for Bell Textron's helicopters are built. This is where the engines for Bombardier are built. And so it has 6,500 people working for it. It is not only important for Canada, but I must say, in the entire company of RTX, which owns Pratt & Whitney, it is a key crown jewel of the company. And that is why also the entire board of RTX was back in June at Longueuil and at the facility to see the facility, but also to approve the investment. And to be frank, David, we're working on even more investments by Pratt & Whitney as they're looking at their next generation of different types of engines. And we think that we can grow that number. So we will double down.
Okay, so let's apply that thinking maybe in a different scenario. When MDA, huge Canadian success story, buys a company in Colorado, buys a company in France, buys a company in the UK. Do those become Canadian, or are they American? Are they still French? Are they still British? How does that work when it's a Canadian owner expanding into other markets?
That's great. When we see, CAE expanding or MDA space expanding, and we can have even stronger also headquarter in Canada, that's what we want. We want to build our homegrown talent. We want to build back Bombardier. We want to even grow even more D'Avelin. We want to grow IMP. We want to definitely grow CAE, MDA Space, Telesat, all these national champions. How I see Canadian companies is both. Is first those who are, Canadian, not only because, of course, they're incorporated in Canada, but also have headquarters in Canada, very strong operations in Canada, but also those who have a real manufacturing footprint and that are key to our supply chain. And so the definition of Canadian company is something that we've focused on in the defense industrial strategy, and that we will continue to double down on.
Next question, Alan Woods.
Alan, after you. You have the floor.
Yes. Hi, Minister. I'd like to ask a question. You're obviously a key minister in the middle power strategy, the pivot, if you want to call it that. You said you're on the front line of the trade war. What I'd like to know is whether your success in your job is a potential irritant in the overall trade relationship. In other words, if you succeed in what you're trying to do, is that a potential problem for the United States?
Alan, I get your question, but that's not how I think. How I see things is my job is to protect jobs in Canada, to create new jobs also, because economic growth is important, and to attract talent and investment. That's my plan. That's what I announced more than a year ago. That's what we've been implementing. And so what we know is when it comes to particularly defense investments, these are things we can control. These are things that we can use as a way to attract even more capital, to attract more investments, to create more jobs. And that's what you're seeing right now in the aerospace sector. But that's what you'll see in the space sector. And that's what you'll see even more in the manufacturing sector as well. Canada didn't participate a lot in the development of a very strong defense industrial compound over the years. Why? Because we were benefiting very much from the peace dividend of the fall of the Berlin Wall, and bit by bit of the fact that we were going through a very strong integration with the US, but also with other economies. Now, what is happening is things are changing. Things are changing not only like the Prime Minister mentioned, where middle powers, like the Prime Minister mentioned in Davos, where middle powers need to work together, and that we need to continue to embrace free trade. But that was my entire speech at Chatham House a bit earlier today, is that at a time where a lot of different industries are impacted by tariffs, a lot of countries around the world have a tendency to have to fall into protectionism mode. So they may have free trade agreements, but they don't want necessarily follow for the affected sectors by the tariffs, and they will come up and want to protect jobs, want to protect plants, will want to protect communities, towns, and protect livelihoods. And so that is definitely what is happening in the steel and aluminum sector. That is what is happening in the auto sector. And you're seeing that in Europe, you're seeing that in the UK, you're seeing that all across the board. Now, that is why I said in my speech at Chatham House that industrial policy was back. And actually that industrial policy was the new geopolitics, because we need to work with the UK. We need to work with Europe. We need to work with Japan, with particularly industrialized countries that have very strong manufacturing sectors, to align our industrial policies, to not hurt each other when basically we're being hurt, to be able to cooperate even more. And so that's why, for example, aluminum, which is a very big strength of ours, well, that we can continue not only to send it to Europe, because we used to send it a lot to the US, and now there's been a 50% increase and more of aluminum going to Europe, but that Europe doesn't have a tendency to close its doors, and to make sure that while it continues to support its smelter, potentially even more, that it can allow the aluminum from Canada to go into the US, and at the same time that it would see the aluminum from Canada as if it's treated the same way as the European aluminum. Steel, for example, is another one. The steel plants have been too much focused on, for too long, on sending steel on the other side of the border, and to be able to get in the supply chain of the auto sector in the US. Now, many of our steel smelters are now having electric arc furnaces. The EU has industrial carbon pricing where they have very high environmental standards. We can benefit from what has happened in Canada and send also that steel to the EU to a certain extent, but the EU must be able to treat our steel as if it is theirs. And so that's what I'm working on. And I think that's how we can also counter the impacts of tariffs. Do you understand what I mean, Alan?
I do. And if I could just follow up, I mean, as you're traveling the world and seeking these investments and these allies in the world, middle power and otherwise, is there any reluctance to partner with Canada, to be seen perhaps by the Trump administration as doing business with sort of, I don't want to say public enemy number one of the Trump administration, but someone who is obviously in the crosshairs as the leader of Canada? Is there any? Yeah.
I think what is important to understand is how much, when Prime Minister Carney went before the world in Davos and explained his vision for middle powers, it provided hope to billions of people around the world, because it was a way to explain that there was an option, that there could be a third way, which was not only the US and not only China, but could be a range of middle powers working together. And it provided hope because it was not only being in reaction mode to what was happening, it was actually being in control of our own destiny. And so that is why there's so much goodwill on the part of different countries to work with Canada, but also amongst each other, because the reality we're going through is something that is very present in different realities of different countries, because they're going through it as well. I know that we have a tendency to think about ourselves and be focused on our own realities, but you know what? All countries have that tendency. Everyone in the world thinks about how they're going through their everyday life. And so I think that being able to, show up, meet people, get to agreements, do government-to-government deals on the industrial side, and at the same time bring in the companies also doing business together, and being able to continue to create prosperity is super important. At the end of the day, the private sector, which I represent in cabinet, is extremely willing to do its part. And I think more than ever, what we're seeing is government and industry is making that government and industry is really working as one team, and one team Canada.
Do you want last question? That's all the questions we had. C'est toutes les questions que nous avions. Ceci met
Okay.
fin à la conférence de presse. This concludes the press conference.
Parfait. Thank you all. Thanks.